So maybe if you guys could do a really quick self-introduction. I can see some names along the bottom. If you take your mouse and go along the bottom, it shows everybody's names. But I'd just like to see a little bit of who people are. And also, by the way, up in the upper left, there's a chat button. If you hit the chat, you can type to, if someone's having an audio problem and can't hear, we can actually notify them with the chat button. But again, thank you for coming, and really looking forward to this. So maybe if you guys just take one sentence to tell me who you are, that'll help a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so I start. My name is Erwin Blom. I have a site called Fast Moving Targets, and the publisher of the book said, do you want to organize this sort of event? So we asked friends and supporters of the site to be here. And I will ask some questions of people who ask them through Twitter as well later on.
Okay, great. Cool. Then there's Johan, or Johan? Or
yes.
How do you, yeah.
It's Johan, yeah, like the soccer player.
Okay.
My name is Johan Voets. I am the co-founder and CTO of Footsie.com. I don't know if you heard about it. It's a web service and a mobile app. It helps you keep track on what you eat on a day-to-day basis. Oh. And by that, gives you insights and help you change your eating habits and keep healthier living.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Justine Marseille. I'm a trend watcher. My company is the Future Institute, which sounds a lot bigger than it is. And I'm very proud to be here and thank Erwin for inviting me. And I think that is because I wrote something about a predictable future.
Okay.
True.
Yes. Marion.
Hi. My name is Marion Mulder. I have a business called Multimedia. That sounds like multimedia, and it's a misspelling of my last name. I really liked Fast Moving Targets, so I became one of the founding members because I really like these kind of initiatives. And when I had the opportunity of meeting you live, I thought I'm going to jump on this because I read your book, New Rules, back in the late 90s, and it was one of the inspirations for doing what I do now. So I have no specific questions, but just being here is really cool. So
great, welcome.
All right, my name is Minded Bussink of MindNote. I'm an entrepreneurial guitarist and media scholar. I develop an open-minded music school or a network of music teachers, and I facilitate them with digital tools and organize 2.0 jam sessions and concerts in cooperation with local institutions.
Great. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Sam. I work in a big publishing company, and before I used to work in a news broadcasting company, and I just like all stuff future.
Okay.
And my name is Vincent Everts. I met you first time in Media Plaza in 1997, the first time you came to the Netherlands. And I loved your Out of Control book because it was the only book me and my girlfriend really read together. She's a psychologist and I was a technologist, and we really enjoyed it. And I made a couple of fan pages. Of you, like all the videos together, and I will show that on a screen share. And but I've been following you for a long time. I met you also in San Francisco a couple of times with Trip. So. Done. And I'm a trend watcher. I basically do presentations on the future, on the consequences of the web and consequences of technology in real life. And I have a couple of companies.
Well, great. Thank you for being a fan. There's really no agenda here. It's just open questions. It sounds like some of you guys know some of my writings, but I'm going to assume that most people have not read the book. So I can do a summary of the book in 10 minutes if people want, or we can just begin with questions. It's kind of up to you. I really want to kind of keep it conversational. I may even ask you guys some questions since you're also much of an expert on the future, and that's how I learn. So I think we kind of take it either way. One thing I might suggest is if you find yourself wanting to type during this session, you may want to put your mute on, because the way Google Plus works is that if it hears anything, you'll be on the picture, so we'll be able to watch you while you're typing. You can just mute this pretty easily, and that way it'll be silent while you're typing. So I do. So I see the screen share. Vincent has a notes there. Okay, good. So Erwin, what you?
I'm just experimenting with that feature. And there's a page of all the videos I could find from you.
Yeah. So, do that tomorrow, Vincent.
I will.
Well, the thing is,
I will.
Yeah.
Well, because the reason is your book. Well, I would love it if you do a brief summary, so we can ask all the questions after that.
Yeah.
Kevin, let me ask you. Did anybody? I mean, you were here at TEDx Amsterdam, right? And you basically were sitting on stage and you were giving your presentation about the future, about the history.
Right.
Is it that introduction, or is it because I think we might have all seen that. I don't know about you, Erwin, or about the other ones. Or is it much more specific about the book?
No, it would be a very similar presentation, and probably not as good as the one at TED. So if people have seen that, we can move on from that. If people have not, then I could do something maybe even shorter than the presentation, just to give you a taste of it.
What I think it is nice to do is because later on, when this is finished, it will be on demand as well. So if we put it on the website, and for people who haven't seen it, it's an introduction. So why this thing is happening.
Sure. So the idea of the book is, it was a question I was asking myself, which is, what does technology mean? What is the role of all this stuff in our life? Is there any framework for understanding it? It appeared to me that we were closer to the world of biology before Darwin came along. At that time, people were collecting things in the wild. They would collect different specimens, and there were cabinets full of these specimens. And basically, biology was just one interesting thing after another. There was really no framework for understanding how it got there or how they fit together. And in some ways, our idea of technology, our theory of technology was the same. It was just one thing after another, one product, antibiotics, rayon, moon rockets, laser guns. I mean, it was just a sequence of different inventions, and there was no framework for understanding how these fit together. What they meant in terms of a larger theory. There was no theory for technology. So, and because there was no theory, there was really no sense of the meaning of it in a cosmic, philosophical sense. So I was on a quest to try and figure out what technology meant, and particularly in a personal way, in the sense of when a new technology does come along, should I embrace it with open arms, or is there any way, a framework to help me understand whether this is a technology that I should do everything it could to increase, or keep it away, hands off, let this one go by? And that was the origins of the book. And so my investigation kind of brought me to an interesting conclusion. So now I'm going to go to tell you where I ended up. Where I ended up was to understand that technology really is an extension of the same process that made all those biological things in the cabinets. That the same framework for understanding technology is the framework that we use to understand biology, which is evolution and life. And that the technium, and I'll explain what I mean by that, is really an extension of the same forces that produce life and evolution. And therefore, if we want to understand the technium, we can do it by understanding it as an evolutionary system. And the question I was sort of, the way I wanted to understand where it was going was to say, if we can answer this question of what the system wants, we can get some idea of where it's going to go. And so let me tell you what I mean by the word want. The idea is that the technium is the system of all these different technologies connected together. So the thing that we're using right now, the screen that you have in front of you, is something that is made up of hundreds and thousands of other sub-technologies. And each of those sub-technologies, from the electrical system to pieces of copper to plastic, themselves require hundreds and if not thousands of other sub-technologies to produce or maintain. And so our technology is really a kind of a network of, or an ecosystem of many different other kinds of technologies that are all self-supporting. So the factory these days, in order to keep going, they require computers, and the computers require factories. So there is a sense in which these are self-supporting, self-catalyzing systems. And that whole system of all these self-supporting technologies is what I call the technium. And the thing about a system is that there can be behavior in a system that's not present in any of the parts. And so this system, this ecosystem of all these different things that we've invented has certain behaviors that are not found in that laptop in front of you or in your automobile. So it exhibits a behavior, and that behavior that it exhibits is sort of biological. It behaves as if it was a living system, even though the individual parts themselves are not living. Okay? And so I ask, what does technology want, in the same way that I would say a plant wants light or a grasshopper wants to have a mate. It's not conscious, it's not deliberate, it's an urgency, a tendency, a bias in certain directions. And so I ask, what does evolution want over time? Are there certain directions in evolution? And somewhat controversially, I side with people like Richard Dawkins, who says that there actually is a bias in evolution over time. It's not just completely random. There's a bias in this system. The system itself has a bias in certain directions. And so I asked, what are the directions in evolution? And I'm saying that those same directions are present in the technium. And that there is a bias in the technium in certain directions. And then here are those biases found in evolution and the technium. And they are a bias towards increasing complexity, increasing diversity, increasing mutualism, socialist tendencies, increasing energy density, increasing evolvability, which is a very important point, that the system itself is increasing the ways in which evolution can happen. It's increasing the ways in which change can work at. And that's one of the fundamental things that the technium is that it's accelerating and intensifying the ways in which things can change, the way in which the system can change, in which it can evolve. And there are others. Those are just a sample. So if we want to know where technology is going, we can say that in the future it is going to be more complex. It's going to be more diverse. It's going to become more specialized, which is another one. It's going to become more energy dense. It's going to become more evolvable. It's going to be becoming more exotropic, which is another one. So all these same things, that's where technology is going. And like in evolution, it also means that certain phases, certain large-scale structures of this are inevitable. That's one of the controversial aspects of this, is that there's inevitabilities, meaning that at the large level, evolution, if you rewind the tape of life and play it again, is going to go through many of the same large-scale structures, even though down at the species level, these are all unpredictable. Contingent is the word. At the higher level, you'll find the same things again. Again, this is what the evidence in biology suggests. We have convergent evolution again and again, so we have the rediscovery of flapping wings or camera eyeballs or stingers again and again, because these structures are inevitable, and it means that in the technium, things like the incandescent electric light bulb were inevitable. We know that because of simultaneous invention, that it happened, was invented multiple times, and multiple simultaneous invention is the norm. So we're looking ahead at certain things that will be inevitable. How they play out, how the politics of them, the character of them, the marketing, all these things are not inevitable, and those choices are actually choices and decisions that actually have great bearing on us, that make a huge difference. But the web was inevitable. What kind of web that we have was not inevitable, whether it was national or international, whether it was commercial or nonprofit, whether it was open or closed. These things were not inevitable, and they make a huge difference. And the same thing as we go forward. Human cloning is inevitable. What kind of human cloning do we have? What's the character? What's the politics? Those are all things that we have a choice about, and they make a huge difference. So the last thing I would say, again in this quick summary, is that the reason why all this is important is because in the end, technology, these inventions bring as many new problems. Each new invention brings almost as many new problems as solutions. And so what the technium is doing is opening up these possibilities. That's the bargain we get. The rest of the reason why we're headed in this direction is we see this increasing expansion of choices and possibilities, which is what the story of evolution is through the cosmos. And as we open up these possibilities, and we have new tools for creating them, which is what the evolvability of the technium is about, that's important for us because each one of us is different, has a different set of talents or abilities, just like we have different faces. And we need technology to use those gifts, to open us up in our genius. So right now, some of us use the inventions of writing, printing for books. Some of us use the inventions of communications and cameras to share our best gifts. And in the past, people who were born like Beethoven required the technology of the symphony and piano, and so the thought experiment that I'd like to suggest people consider is, imagine if Beethoven had been born 2,000 years before the piano or the symphony had been invented. What a loss to himself and to the rest of us that would have been. And you can go through any of the great artists and imagine, George Lucas or Alfred Hitchcock being born before the invention of the cinema technology, what a loss that would have been. And so we can wind that forward and say that there are children, a Shakespeare who has been born in this generation of children, who is waiting for us to invent her technology so that their genius can shine. And so we have a certain an obligation to bring forth these possibilities in the technium. because people are born and will be born who are waiting for us to make these, just as we have benefited from the invention of those previous to us. And so there is a moral dimension to this technique of exploding. And that moral dimension is that the more technology there are, the more possibilities we have, the better we are, and therefore that we, in general, want to embrace technology even though each new piece will bring new problems for us, many, many, many new problems. There is no utopia. Any technology that's powerful will be powerfully abused. This technology we're using right now, the internet, is probably the most one of the most powerful technologies we've ever invented, and it will be powerfully abused. But still, we need to embrace it because those possibilities will be unleashed to this generation and generations to come. And that's what technology wants. So that's a short summary of it. So I know that everyone has agreed with 100% of everything about that, and we don't have...
Shall we, everyone, just ask a question, or do you want...
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, people shoot, yeah.
Yes, somebody, go ahead. Who has the first question?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Kevin Kelly. Here is Vincent.
Yeah.
Is it okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
I basically recognize a lot of your thinking in one of the first book I read of you, Out of Control, where all the little parts were becoming a big swarm and having all kinds of behavior which they weren't aware of. And of course, we are the little flies in the big swarm, and we're having all kinds of behavior. And you're trying to get those rules a little bit objectified. Okay, that is a beautiful way to look at it. What does it mean practically about me as an individual in the swarm? I'm part of a bigger house. And what does it mean also to in how much we can control it? I mean, we have been out of control for a long time, but we're also trying to integrate the web in our daily work, in our daily laws, in our daily politics. What does it mean if you look at technology from this abstract, developing monster, which is going somewhere? What choices do we have, and what choices do we don't have? What are the practical implementations of looking at having a vision like this?
Yeah. So one thing I think is that a lot of what we see, these technologies that come along, that we have to sort of accept that they're going to be there, and not try to prohibit them. So we have to kind of accept that these things are coming. So you know, like
human cloning, we just have to accept it will be there. We just have to manage it.
Right, exactly. Human cloning, GMOs, genetically modified foods, and even some of these social media that people are sort of we're kind of all wrestling with. You know, like you know, the Facebooks in the world and the sharing and all this kind of stuff. Yes, of course, everyone's going to share everything else. Or cameras coming. This whole idea of cameras. So yes, they're going to be everywhere. So we have to sort of accept that. And then we have to sort of work with the fact that then we have to sort of take our energies to try and make that kind of surveillance as useful and good as possible, rather than trying to say we prohibit it from happening. Okay, so that's one thing in the personal zone. The second thing is that I don't think that means that even though that I think there's two levels of acceptance. There's one, the level of acceptance of it as a society level. The other one is, do we have to use it ourselves? And we don't. And one of the things that I discovered in this is that the number of technologies coming along are so great that we and will continue to get greater and greater, that we don't actually have enough time in our lives to even touch all these technologies. So we're under no obligation ourselves personally to become expert on everything. In fact, we can actually opt out in a kind of a creative way without necessarily trying to prohibit others from it. And so I think that's the other distinction is that we can kind of practice a minimalist view ourselves without necessarily trying to remove it from the pool. It's sort of like in the ecosystem, an individual part may only touch hundreds of others. It's not touching necessarily everything in the ecosystem, but it's also not trying to prohibit everything else. And so there is a kind of I don't know what the word is, not a zen, but there's a kind of a certain sophisticated use of the technology where we can not necessarily have to be engaged with all of it, but not prohibiting it or trying to reduce it. So personally, my take on this is I want to have the minimum amount of technology in my life in order to maximize my possibilities, but also I want to maximize the amount of technology in the world for others to choose from. And so that seems kind of contradictory, but actually is in fact one of the differences between, say, me and the Amish, who only want to minimize the number of technologies in their lives, but they aren't trying to maximize it for others. And I think this idea of minimizing for yourself while maximizing for others is one of the things that we can do with this. And then the third thing, I think, is to understand that there are different expressions of a technology. While a technology may be inevitable, what I call the expression of that technology is not inevitable. So DDT, as a molecule, cannot be undone. It's actually very effective as a pesticide. What you don't want to do with it is to use it as a pesticide for agriculture. You do want to use it sprayed around households individually. It's one of the most effective malaria eradicators that we know of, saving hundreds of millions of lives a year. It's the same molecule expressed differently. And so there's this idea that what we want to do is we want to find the best job for technology. These technologies come along, and our question is does it have the right set of friends? Is it in the right network? Is it the most convivial expression of this technology? Is it open? Is it easy to participate in? Is it transparent? Is it open? Is it increasing possibilities versus decreasing? So any technology that we make can be weaponized. When you weaponize a technology, what you're doing is you're making an expression of it that is used to decrease possibilities for others. So any technology that can be weaponized can also be peacified. It can we can make it more open, more useful. And so one of the things that we have is these technologies are inevitable. Let's find the right job for it. Let's peacify it. Let's make it more convivial. Let's keep it open for possibilities for others, and then we can decide or not, to our extent, whether we're going to be trying to master it or not. We can let it go personally if we want, or if we're able to. So those are some of the things I think that this view suggests, is that these things are going to come. Each one can be made more convivial. It can be found the expression of it. We have no obligation to ourselves to become masters of all these things. We can kind of select from them to the extent that we want to. But in each case, we're trying to make them and find forms of them that keep increasing the possibilities for others. Because possibilities is a currency.
Mm-hmm. Shall we make the round so everyone can at least ask questions they had?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sam, you're next.
Who's next?
Sam, but we don't hear you, Sam.
Okay.
So now it's better,
Sam,
right?
can you
switch on the microphone?
Can't hear you. Okay, well, maybe someone else.
Microphone off, yeah.
Yes, I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you a question about.
Okay.
Can you hear me clearly? Okay.
Yes.
So, by Marshall McLuhan about the Gutenberg galaxy, and he talks about the history of print. And he considers type as a technology.
Yes.
I think it's really interesting to read about type or text or the alphabet. So I can imagine that it's an invention and it.
I lost that. I didn't hear that. Could you repeat that?
He just
Maybe by something new.
We lost you a little bit there.
Because maybe it's like it needs.
So
blah 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 blah. Yeah.
Let me just. I don't hear your full question, but let me just take off on this idea that the alphabet and writing were technologies, which they absolutely were, and I think that we should understand that in my view of the technium, these soft technologies like a calendar, social organizations, the library, Wikipedia. These are all technologies on the level of writing, and we should understand them as things that we have created with our minds and therefore technological, and that oftentimes some of these soft, somewhat invisible technologies are often some of the most powerful ones that we have, and so. These media technologies of video and other things are absolutely crucial and fundamental in our world, because communication technologies are the foundation of our culture, and culture is the main event. So I would think that the great thing that McLuhan did was to focus attention on not the things that were being produced by the media, but the media itself. So he called it the medium is the message, that what was being conveyed over the internet, in a certain sense, was less important than the fact that it was being conveyed over the internet. And so, he said, in other words, he was saying it didn't matter what was on TV, it was just the fact that it was on TV that was important. In a certain sense, it almost doesn't matter what the website is, it's the fact that it's on a website that's the crucial thing. And I think that idea is still really worth considering, that it doesn't almost matter what we're saying right now, it's just the fact that we are connected in this way. That is sort of, in the end, going to be the more important influencer upon us, is the fact that we're able right now to meet in this way, transatlantic, transcontinental, in real time, and in a certain sense, in the end of the day, that actually may have more influence on us than actually what we're saying during this time. That's the McLuhan idea, and I agree with that. So, anyone else?
Okay. Minded next.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's sort of in line of this idea, and McLuhan in 2008, Nicholas Carr wrote the book The Big Switch. And he sort of started with the same idea, with the technological progress and the consequences, the human consequences. They are determined not simply by the advances in science and engineering, but by the influence technology has on the cost of producing and consuming goods and services. He says a competitive marketplace guarantees that more efficient modes of production and consumption will win out over less efficient ones. So he sort of says it's in the end it's what we buy, and the like you started off the like 2,000 years ago, if we can get our food and if we can get our like basic needs. That's sort of the rule of all progress, and I was wondering, how should we take this idea into account for future developments of the technicum?
Yeah. I thought it was interesting because Nick Carr, of course, his second book called The Shallows was much more critical of these things. He just to summarize it, was he took the big switch, but then he went further with his new book, where he was really very critical of the distraction element that all this stuff is made, and how he believes that it's sort of taken away from the kind of introspective contemplation that we get when we read a book, and that ability with all this new media, that we have kind of a shallower attention span. We no longer have the deep investigation, introspective contemplation that we have reading a book. When we're reading the web and we're flitting around and being distracted, that we're incapable of doing the kind of appreciation that you've just done by reading his book. He's saying that we're no longer able to do that because we're reading things on the web and we're reading in little snippets, and therefore we're incapable of kind of having a larger conversation. So I think his ideas are half correct, in the sense that I think that is one of the effects, that these technologies do have an effect on what we buy, and what we buy does have an effect, and how we spend our time does have an effect. But I think those are as I said before, every new technology has problems. I think these are some of the problems that these technologies bring, and I want to emphasize that actually I do believe that they are really problems, that they are significant. But I think when we do the calculation, I think that we'll find out is that the advantages of this kind of thinking, the fact that we need to be able to have, in this kind of global world, we need to actually be paying attention to everything, that this new kind of attention, these new sensibilities, these new skills, are going to give us more in the end than the loss, and there will be a loss, of from the old media. So that's what I would say about Nick Carr's ideas, is that he's really focusing on the costs, and I think those costs are real, and those consequences are real, but I think he's not including all the actual benefits which are still remain to be made visible to us. I think we're still uncovering and discovering what those benefits will be.
And you don't think it's an underlying rule of the technium, like the basic needs of producing and consuming goods?
Yes, I would agree with him there that the commercial aspects of the technium are inevitable. That there will be the technium invents needs. All right, so a lot of what we think of as needs start off as simply desires, and the desires that were created by technology, and
like the needs you just mentioned before, like growth and diversity.
Yes, I think my vision of who we are is that we have been self-created, that we are creating ourselves with these technologies, and that because of technologies we are actually different beings than we were without technology. And part of what we do is, we now have invented our appetite for new things, and so that's become a crucial aspect of our being, which has in some ways been created by these technologies. And so the technium has changed us, and because we are now changed by the technium, we ourselves are part of the technium. We are technological in a certain sense.
So it's like the middle of the McLuhan-Williams debate. It's like the synthesis of the
right.
the influence of the technology on the culture, or the culture on the technology.
Right. There's a two-part thing. Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Marion, do you have a question?
So, let's see.
Sorry, I wanted to just ask you, why are you so optimistic about the consequences of this? Because, I mean, the cost of all this lack of attention you've talked about, but why do you think that everything together will be working out positively, or will it destroy us?
That's a good question. My optimism is based on 10,000 years of history. So what we see in 10,000 years is basically ongoing progress. And so the way I think the calculus works, and one of the things I try to do in the book is actually try to convince people that progress is real, to stop denying the fact that there has been progress. And most of the things that you think are important, you can measure the differences in time, say, between now and 2,000 years ago. And we have far more possibilities and we have longer lives, better health, more education, you only have to go back to visit the few hunter-gatherers still on Earth today to see the difference, to see the real, actual progress. And while you may want to visit them, what's interesting is that there are not busloads of people who are going back into the country, taking all their clothes off, living only by fire. And the reason is not because that's not satisfying. That there's actually a tremendous attraction to that, because that very simple life can be very rewarding in many ways. But what it does not have is it does not have choices and possibilities. So the reason why there's the migration into the cities, the reason why millions, hundreds of millions of people every year are moving into the cities with one-way tickets, is because they're leaving these beautiful homes in South China or the Himalayas or the islands in Greece or somewhere where there's often organic food and very strong families with very high support and a very strong sense of who they are. The kind of quality of life there is very high. Why are they leaving? They're leaving because they could stay and try to survive growing their own food. They're leaving because the city offers choices and possibilities. They could become a mathematician. They become a photographer, a tax accountant. They don't have to be a farmer. They don't have to do what their mother and father did. They have choices, and they'll live in a slum in Bombay because where in a certain sense it's more uncertain. It's more crowded. In some ways, the quality of life at some level is less, but they're living there because they have more choices, because they can at least have electricity, because they have the possibility of having a school. And so that's why we're moving into the future. That's what the future is. It's the city of tomorrow in a certain sense. I'm optimistic because as we move forward through history, we keep seeing that we're opening up these possibilities every year. And so by my calculation, even if we can create 1% more than we destroy every year, that 1% difference is actually good. And if we can compound that over time, that 1% compounded over time is civilization. So I'm saying the world is better tomorrow, but not by very much. But it doesn't need to be by very much. If we can get just a few % difference every year, that over time compounds into something very, very powerful.
So how do you then explain the decline of big civilizations, or how do they fit into this idea of?
Yeah, I take a global view of this. And so civilization, while individual species of a civilization may die, they rarely die. There's actually very few cities that have died. Most cities continue to keep going. They're open-ended. Occasionally, a city will die, but most old cities are still going. Cities are civilizations. Most civilizations are still going. They kind of transmute into something. They don't really die. You know, Greeks, did the Greek civilization die? Well, yes and no. So, in a certain sense, failure in civilization is actually very, very rare. There may be particular institutions that may, a species of institution that may die, but they are most often just transformed into something else, and they have a different name. So I think it's actually very rare.
Yeah. Can we? I know Johan and Justine and Marion. Do you have a question, maybe? Because 4 o'clock is is the time that we finish.
Well, I was actually wondering. You mentioned in your recap of your book the personality of technology, and in the current time we're seeing that a lot of people are making technology personal by keeping track of their health. This is my angle, of course, from Footsy's side, but we see a lot of motion sensors, jawbone-ups, Fitbits, all kind of hardware making technology a personal-ish thing. And I was actually wondering how you're seeing this in relationship with the technology personality versus the personal personality. Are we making technology personal ourselves?
Right. Yeah. So in our side here, I'm calling that the quantified self. And
as I would call it as well.
Right. And I was involved in actually launching the quantified self. And the first meeting of the quantified self actually happened right here in this studio. And I think that this idea of tracking yourself is inevitable. I think we're going to do more and more people are going to do it because it's going to be basically free. It would be basically cost nothing, and the results, the benefits of that will be very large when you do it all the time in real time. So right now, you have your Fitbit, which is tracking your activity. You can have pulse rate monitor looking at your pulse. You can have location, GPS that tells you where you are. You can do your genes. And now, actually, I was just involved in, I have something here, I'm involved in doing our blood, where we do 70 different aspects of your blood on a regular basis. I mean, most people get their blood tested, I don't know, maybe every couple of years at the most, maybe never. But we're looking at doing from a little prick on your finger, doing it every month, maybe even more often than that, where you begin to actually see, you can pick up toxins in the environment. Let's say you go somewhere and you come back and test your blood and you find out that you've actually picked up some toxins, and you say at that soccer field, and you say, well, I'm never going to go back there again because it's got toxins. Or oftentimes these things form a baseline for understanding what's normal. So all of us have our own normal, but we don't even know what our own normal is. And that's one of the things that we're going to see in medicine is that right now the idea of a normal is some kind of global average that may have almost nothing to do with you. But if you can self-track your bodily functions over time for many years on a 24-hour basis, suddenly you have a very good idea of your own body and what's normal for your own body. That can lead to kind of personalized medicine, personalized pharmacology. And so this idea that we are a system right now that we're not even aware of, that we can become, that this is a means of self-knowledge, not just for our health, but also for our productivity, so people can track what they're doing with their time, whether they're really being productive, where they really spend their time. It can be a kind of a self-knowledge in terms of becoming aware of how we actually behave, what we actually do during the day versus what we think we do. Those are often a huge gap between who we think we are, what we think we do versus what we actually do.
The metaphor I usually use when people ask me why you should keep self-track is I usually say to people, well, you step into a car and you use the dashboard and the accelerometer to see how fast you're driving, and you adjust your speed when you're driving too fast. Right. But here we are using our bodies for at least 2 centuries or 2,000 years without any form of knowledge about how we're using it and are we doing it on the right way.
Right. Numbers are very hard to argue with. We emphasize in the quantified self that numbers are not the only way in which you can know. You can still do meditation and self-awareness. There's many other techniques, and we're not against those. But we're saying here's a whole new realm of knowing yourself, and then also sharing it, which is another aspect of the numbers. Is that numbers makes it very easy to share, and that what we know is that whatever we can measure, we will share. So that's been one of the surprises, is that people were saying people aren't going to share medical information and all this kind of stuff, and the answer is yes, they will. Under the right conditions, people will share almost anything. And so, yeah.
Maybe I'm working on the subject of predictable futures,
yes.
And that's also a bit of quantified self, because it's from big data,
Yep.
trying to analyze how people will react on reactions of other people and how that will be in the future.
Yes.
And I was looking at the long bets project.
Uh-huh.
I love it, but I was very interested. Is there any research on the long bets as a decision tool or as a predictive tool, or is it
not that
too
I
long
know
ago?
I'm not aware of any research, but that would be a fantastic thing to look at, to see whether to see the influence of predictions. In fact, that's the reason why we started long bets, is we felt that there wasn't enough of a feedback loop and going back to see to prove that there was these circuits, because it was our assumption that people who make predictions do have an influence,
Yeah, of course.
of some way, although that has not been studied as far as I know. But I hope someone like you does that study. Yeah. So let's see. The only one we haven't heard from is Marion. Do you have a question? I can't hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's clicking on the sound. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't really have a question. I mean, there's so many thoughts I have, and there's a lot of links for all the things I've read. So I'm just going to keep short and just continue listening and being inspired, because I do read a lot of things in this, things like my life bits that I've read about that you're touching on. So this is very, very interesting. There's too many questions at one in my head, so they won't get any proper stuff out right now, but it's very inspirational, so thank you.
Okay, great.
Kevin, can I ask one last question then from someone who Twittered it? He said he works at Google Plus, actually, in the Netherlands, at Google, and he said there used to be a time where science fiction portrayed our future, and now it seems the world develops faster than our imagination. Do you recognize that?
No. Who wrote it?
Well, the good thing is today I'm only passing the questions on. So if the answer is no, then that's the answer.
Well, I mean, I recognize. I think it's true, but I don't recognize where it came from. But I think that. I think the speed of things is definitely a challenge for us, and I think it's going to get faster. And this is where this idea of the singularity comes from, which I don't agree with in its strong version. But I do agree with that there is this sense in which, as we imagine the world getting faster and faster, it seems as if it will become so fast that we cannot be part of it in some ways. And it's a real challenge to understand how things, like, if 100 years change can happen in 10 years now, then can it happen in 1 year in 20 years from now, and then can it happen in 1 minute? How could that be? So I think this idea that the speed of things is going to be a challenge, I agree with. I don't agree with this idea that we kind of go into this black hole and we arrive at this point where there's a super intelligence that can give us immortal life and it solves all our problems. I don't go with that idea, but I do think that there is something happening with the speed of things that makes it very hard for us to understand what happens, and that it can't just, it can't go on the way it is. So in that sense, I do think there is something that shifts. I don't know what it is, but I do think that that's a real challenge for us, is to understand how we deal with this rate of change that keeps increasing. And whether it goes beyond our imagination, I don't know. But I do think that this is a challenge. And I have a technocentric view of the world. I believe that the response to most of the problems of technology is more technology. Okay, that's whatever solution we have is going to be more technology, which itself will produce more problems. But that's the way it goes. And so I think we're going to invent technologies to help us deal with the accelerated speed of the world, and that those technologies themselves will, in the end, produce more problems too.
And will we as humans still have a role in that? Because I mean, at the end of in 2020, we have computers as powerful as the brain. We have figured out the brain in 2030. Will there still be some role for us to play in this?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Because we are technology ourselves. We're part of. We're making ourselves as fast as we make the stuff around us, and so, we'll have implants. We'll put these brains in our heads. So this idea that computers take over and they don't need us is there's no evidence at all anywhere that we aren't central to this, and there's plenty of evidence in our own experience in the biological world that as we become more sophisticated as humans, we realize the value of the other species on this planet, and as we become smarter, more aware, more evolved, we actually understand that we want these other diversities. There's no reason to make an artificial intelligence that's human-like, because we can so easily make human intelligence. It's a baby, 9 months. Untrained labor can make another human intelligence. Why would we make machines think like humans? The whole purpose of artificial intelligence is to make other kinds of thinking, to make other kinds of minds, because by making other kinds of minds, they can help us solve problems. We have 6 billion humans already thinking about these problems. What we need is a different kind of intelligence, a different kind of mind. Most of the artificial stuff that we're going to make is we're going to make things that think differently. Think different. That's the value. So we're needed because we will think like humans. We want other kinds of thoughts, other kinds of thinking, other kinds of minds, and that's where the value will be. And so collectively, we're all valuable because we all think different. So I really need to stop. Obviously this could go on for a long time. You have great questions. Thank you for your attention and for your great questions, your great company, your enthusiasm for these ideas. I hope you enjoy the book, and thanks for hanging out here.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.